Okay, welcome. So Ana, for those of you that aren't aware, was the lead organiser for WordCamp London 2018. And tonight we're here just to have a bit of a conversation, a bit of a discussion around what goes into organising a WordCamp. Just out of interest, is there anybody here who's never been to a WordCamp? So a few of you? Okay. Well, hopefully by the end of this we'll have enthused you enough to join us at the next one. In fact, WordCamp Brighton will be the next one in the UK. So Ana.
Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Would you just mind just telling us a bit more about yourself, a bit more of your background and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So thank you to Dan and Gary for having me here and actually inviting me here today. I don't think I ever would actually have applied to speak. So it's a good thing that you invited me. So I, as Dan said, I work for an agency called Human Made, and I work in marketing and communications. And that was pretty much the kind of background that I had before I kind of came into the WordPress community. So I very much felt like a novice the first time I ever attended a WordPress event, and in fact it was WordPress London about 3 years ago, which was my very first WordPress event, and I cannot tell you how out of my depth I felt back then. So yeah, it's been an interesting progress, we can say.
Thank you. So it's incredible the journey that you've gone on, and having now led one of the global's largest WordCamps, WordCamp London. Could you just tell me a bit more about your kind of what a WordCamp means to you?
Yeah. So I think I'll kind of start off talking in a kind of very basic way about what WordCamps are for the benefit of anybody who hasn't attended one. A WordCamp is it's a kind of a big WordPress meetup. WordPress meetups happen kind of locally and monthly. A WordCamp will happen generally once a year, and it will be a much bigger event. More talks, more tracts, and more people in general. So for me, WordCamps, over the kind of 3 years that I've been working in the WordPress community, they've really kind of showed me, and I said this when we spoke on the podcast, so forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but they're kind of like a celebration of a community effort. So it's everything that's happened throughout that year that you celebrate at the WordCamp. The WordCamp, I think, has a lot of vanity statistics associated with it. It seems really big and really flashy, it's 600 people. That's what kind of feels like the big thing that happens, but it's not. The WordCamp really is an accumulation of all the effort that, people have put in kind of throughout that time. So hopefully that's a good explanation for you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just out of interest, did you have any experience organising large-scale events prior to organising WordCamp London? Because this was an event of, as you said, 600 people. It's quite a sizable event to have to manage.
Yeah, so Human Made actually organises quite a few events. We, in fact, used to have an events team, which I was very much a part of. And, we've organised kind of a day of rest and a week of rest, and I'd been loosely involved in the organisation of those. The one I'd been most involved with was an online conference for remote workers and distributed teams that we ran last year called Out of Office. And even though that was 1,400 people, and it seems like, whoa, that's big, it's online. So it doesn't compare to an on-the-ground event. So no, the answer is I hadn't had any experience. The short answer.
Definitely a bit of a baptism of fire there.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So obviously the organising a WordCamp there's a lot of support around organising a WordCamp. Did you receive much training and support from WordCamp Central? Maybe you want to explain what WordCamp Central is to the audience for those that aren't aware?
Yeah, I don't want to get the terms wrong because I very often do. That's how much of a novice I am. So WordCamp Central, which I believe is the global community team now, Dan, which we have to refer to them as the global community team.
Absolutely right.
We can't call them Central anymore.
I've even got that in my notes.
No, it's all right. I do that all the time. So the global community team are basically the kind of core volunteers that help WordCamp organisers and WordCamp leads. And I did receive some support for them. In fact, the global community team, I think it was, don't quote me on this, literally being recorded, about 3 years ago, they launched I think the mentorship program. Gary will correct me if I'm wrong. They launched a mentorship program where basically they pair up leads with somebody who has experience running these things. And generally what you kind of need is you need somebody who kind of knows how things work internally at kind of in, WordCamps and within the kind of WordPress.org global community team, because there are a lot of intricacies which are very specific to WordCamps. Everything from kind of being non-commercial events to making sure that all the content is, GPL and all that kind of stuff. So having that kind of direct contact was really important. And you mentioned Slack before, and we would literally, I'd just open a DM and I'd send her a message and I'd get a response straight back, which is really important when you've got this kind of unmovable deadline that you're working towards.
That's great, thank you. And again, we were talking about a kind of a global community of WordCamps there. Did you get any kind of support from other WordCamp organisers, as in other WordCamps?
Yeah. So I think there's a kind of shared understanding between all WordCamp organisers. Kind of like, oh yes, I understand. I'm not sure if I could say like directly. I kind of got that support, but at the same time, I don't want to say I didn't. It was probably because I didn't ask for it that I didn't get it. I did have involvement from other WordCamp organisers, kind of outside of the core WordCamp London team, who were actually involved as well in parts of the event that we organised.
So had you, prior to WordCamp London, had you had much experience with organising volunteers? Because obviously the event has a huge community of volunteers around supporting it.
Yeah, so Barbara, who was our volunteers lead, is sitting over there in the corner. She did a lot of work leading our team of, I think it's 40 or so volunteers. And again, no, I had not managed 40 people before. And in fact, when we're talking about volunteers, I very much am of the belief that volunteers are everybody who participates in the event, right? So when I was actually thinking about the numbers, you add up the 50 speakers, you've got the 40 volunteers, kind of 10 or so organisers, you've got about another 20 or 30 sponsors who are, obviously paying to be there, but they're still considered volunteers. That, really kind of mounts up. So, people management is a huge part of this, and no, I had not had any experience in that as well.
And I guess it's a very different style of people management, because you're managing volunteers, not individuals that are maybe employed in the role.
Yeah, I think that's probably I think it's the most rewarding thing, and the biggest challenge is that you have people who are often, in fact, my core team of organisers were pretty much all self-employed and ran their own businesses. I think it was only me and one other organiser who work for an agency. Like I said, I work for HumanMade. Like, we're very kind of focused on contributing. I get given all of the kind of time and resources to do that. That's kind of very much, a part of my job when I did the role. I wasn't kind of doing it outside of work times, but for the majority of organisers who I can see in this room right now, all of my organisers, they were very much doing it outside of their work time.
Thank you. You were a co-lead for 2017. How did your role differ between the co-lead and being the lead of a WordCamp?
Hugely, because I think, it's like with everything, right? People kind of understand the role of the person who is kind of like the gatekeeper, the last port of call. If you've ever been in that position in any type of scale, at whatever size really, you kind of understand that, everything kind of comes to you at the end of the day. Even though you assign team leads and, you have very kind of determined and committed people in those roles, you are responsible for how this event runs. Like, you need to make sure that you understand all of the areas of the event and you're not kind of leaving anything behind. So it differed mainly in the kind of level of involvement. I would dream of WordCamp London, and it was there when I was having a shower, and it was just everywhere all the time, being a lead. Whereas when I was co-lead, I had somebody there to do that. I didn't have to worry about all of that stuff. I only had to focus on the stuff that I was focusing on.
Yeah, you mentioned there obviously some of the tools that were used to communicate Slack. Did you kind of find any challenges with that at all?
Yes. So there's this big kind of responsibility on WordCamp organisers to organise in the open. I think that's very much a part of, letting people have a view into what's going on, and so that they can decide for themselves, is this something I'd want to get involved in? Like, could I get involved in this? Like, how much time is actually required for this? And I actually found organising in the open really difficult, because organising in the open means everybody can comment on the things that you're doing, and everybody has feedback. And what's very interesting about feedback is that it's often the people who are the furthest away who have the kind of the harshest feedback, or I can't believe you're doing it this way, why are you doing it this way? And of course that's necessary to organise a community event, and catering and accommodating for 600 people, it's a lot, and so you need all those voices, but sometimes those voices can be a little bit destructive, and in fact people kind of forget that you have kind of maybe an hour to do this task. You don't have 5 hours to debate how you're going to start the task or what process you're going to apply to kind of do the task. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think obviously that as a role where you're managing volunteers, and you're having to manage those individuals that are volunteering their time to undertake these tasks, it can be quite challenging to ensure that the tasks are completed with the community being aware of how they're being completed.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you see any opportunities? Do you see any opportunities for improving the way WordCamps are supported?
Yes, and in fact we had a really good conversation about this at WordCamp London. So as I mentioned before, I don't have a kind of community management role, which for anybody who is kind of familiar in the WordPress space, you'll know that there are agencies and organisations that do hire community roles, and often these the community kind of management roles or community development roles, whatever they are, the focus is very much to do these things, to get these WordCamps on and get these meetups and all this kind of stuff. Essentially develop the community. That is not my role. So it was really tricky to kind of put my actual responsibilities of my job aside to commit to this kind of stuff. And I've forgotten the question that I was answering.
Whether you see any opportunities to improve WordCamps going forward?
So what I think people should do more of, if agencies and organisations value WordCamps, I think that they should consider hiring for community roles. We actually have, at Human Made, we have a community role. We mentioned Jenny Wong earlier. She was the co-organiser. She was the lead organiser for 2016 and 2017, which I was also organising. And she, that's very much her job. Her job is to kind of develop the community. She works really kind of intensely with the community. She can afford that time. Whereas, my organisers are here. It was very difficult for us to kind of say, I'm not going to prioritise my business, and I'm actually going to kind of volunteer my free time because I'm such a good person out of the goodness of my heart. Nobody does that. And we've talked about kind of potentially having these roles either paid for or supplemented in some way, and I think that part of that can definitely come from agencies and organisations, no matter how big or small. If you value the WordCamp, then you really should consider putting those roles in your organisation, because like I've said, and like we've all said, we can't do this again. So somebody has to step up to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, it is obviously a community-driven event that needs to be supported. Perfect. So, slight shift here. WordCamp London has, led in some of the inclusive and accessible features that have been made available to the attendees. Do you see kind of more opportunities for this? What's next for?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question, because it's probably the reason why I organised WordCamp London. Accessibility and inclusivity. Talk to me about web accessibility, because I don't know about that. But I do know about event accessibility, and accessibility in general is something I'm very passionate about, and inclusivity as well. So we actually asked, we haven't sent the survey around yet, but we have a post-event attendee survey. So if you were there, please do kind of fill it in. But we always ask people is there an accessibility feature that we've missed or that you want? And I'm really looking forward to getting that feedback. But what I personally feel is kind of missing, with hindsight is awesome. but something I would kind of go back and change is more of a focus on diversity and representation, because that is really something that is super important to me. And I grew up in Brent, which is the most diverse borough in London, and the first time I kind of walked into a WordPress event, I was a bit like, whoa, this doesn't look like London to me. So yes, accessibility and inclusivity are so important, and I feel like we've made huge kind of changes and improvements, and like you said, it's so important that people are kind of taking that back to their own communities and their own WordCamps and events as well, except other events. But diversity and representation is like another kettle of fish. It takes a lot of time. An accessibility feature is, okay, we're going to have childcare at the event, we're going to pay for childcare, we're going to have that there, we're going to go to a university event, London Metropolitan University, which is built for accessibility. It's got the ramps, it's got access for hearing loops and all that kind of stuff. Diversity and representation is a different thing, and it's really hard. So for me, if I wish I could say, I really have the time to organise WordCamp London again. If I did say that, and if I could do that, that would be the focus for me. So that is like the next step for me, kind of beyond accessibility and inclusivity.
Oh, excellent. Great answer. How best would you say, if the community wanted to get involved with a WordCamp, what's the best route to get started?
Don't. I'm joking. I'm joking. You were waiting for that one. No, I wouldn't say that at all. It was super rewarding, and I'm sure all the other organisers would agree. So the first place to get started, you mentioned it earlier, was the WP. It's wpslack.uk, right? Just really simple URL. You just go on there, get into Slack. Slack is where all the conversation happens. It's where the organising teams are. You're obviously from the UK community. I would assume. If you're not, there is also the Make WordPress blog. I don't know the URL for that. Does anyone want to shout it out? Does anyone?
For the Slack community?
Yeah, for the wider Slack community.
Yes.
WordPress.org/chat. Yeah, we think. We're not sure though, so give it a try. So yeah, I would say Slack is a good place. It's something like
that's
that.
The one, yes.
Those words, just type those words into Google and
chat.wordpress.org.
So yeah, I would say Slack is the main place. I would also say, reach out to other WordCamp organisers. Slack is a really kind of social community. It's it's really nice in there, and you can ask people questions. And maybe if you're not comfortable asking them out in the open, DM someone. You can definitely DM me. I'm at Ana Silva. So please, feel free to ask people questions. But that's the kind of first thing I would say. Join Slack, start asking questions.
Excellent. And I guess beyond that, volunteering would be a great route in to actually be actively involved in a WordCamp.
Absolutely. Before, when you're at the stage where you're like, I think I might want to organise a WordCamp. So you then go and you volunteer at a WordCamp. You volunteer at several. You try and get to as many as you can. And then what you do is you take that back and you say, okay, well, I learned this and this from this event, and I felt like this didn't go very well here, and this is what I should apply here. And that also gives you, opens up so many different doors for you to understand what the community actually wants as well. Because that's really important. You're organising an event, and that's great. This isn't a commercial event. It is for a community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're potentially a little bit nervous, if you've never been to a WordCamp before, then actually volunteering is the best way to go forward, because you're instantly put in with another group of people that are in the same position. Yeah. And it's such an open, inclusive, welcoming community. Certainly this year, London, run by an incredible lead, with Bab sitting over in the corner there. It's a really great way to become part of the community if you're not familiar with it.
We actually, just to that point, we actually had somebody who told us afterwards, I actually was exactly that, really nervous about coming on my own, because sometimes you want to go to an event and it's not a night out, so it's a bit difficult to invite, come along to this wonderful WordPress. We've got to be there at 8 in the morning and there's registration and all that kind of stuff. So actually kind of coming along, it's 600 people, it's a lot. So volunteering, exactly like you said, we're a good team spirit.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Well, I've just got some questions that have come in from the community. If you don't mind, we'll ask some of those. Yes, some of them have been vetted. But this one comes from Keith Devon from the High Rise Digital team. He has asked a couple of questions. He wants to know approximately how many hours did Ana spend organising it?
So I think we had a conversation about this. all the hours that existed under the sun. So we had a conversation about this, and a lot of people have asked me this question, and I've given the fairy tale answer, and it's kind of just standing there like, just give me a number, even if you're rounding up to 100, just give me a number. So I've tried to think about what that number might be, and I would probably say that, so I was asked earlier how soon before the event we actually organise. So we put in the application in about November, so that's 6 months lead time. And between kind of like November and February, it's like a part-time thing. It's something that you can do on the side as a lead, I would say, and I'd say as a team lead as well. And then for me personally, in the 2 months to 6 weeks before, the lead up before, it's a full-time job, which meant that I couldn't attend the kind of standard meetings that I had in my role, in marketing and communications at Human Made, and I wasn't able to kind of meet the deadlines that I'd set prior. Everything stopped, and it all became WordCamp London. So if that gives you an idea of actual hours, and then adds all the hours that all my other team leads did too. So we've got 8 to 10 team leads, so it's not just one person. If it had just been me, it would have been 6 months before, solidly, Monday to Monday. So.
Yes, a lot gone into it, isn't it? Keith also asked, what was the most unexpected, difficult part of the job?
So I'd mentioned this earlier. So I think it was 2 things predominantly. Managing people is always difficult. It's also, like I said, it's the most gratifying part of it. It's the best thing that you do, but it's also a really difficult thing because not only are people volunteers, but I personally felt that I needed to accommodate for the fact that people were volunteers and people were actually running their own businesses, and I wasn't running my own business. So, if somebody said to me, Anna, look, I've got this thing that is happening, I've got this, project that's coming up, even if I was annoyed and I was angry because I didn't want to do it, and it was so many hours, you just have to, that's what you have to do. And from the very beginning when I applied to lead, I knew that would be the case. So much so last year, the Monday, so WordCamps were London, Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Between Monday and Thursday, I was in hospital of that week. So Jenny didn't have me at all. I was out. I wasn't responding to any, I just was out. And she just had to pick it up. That's what you do. But another thing I really wanted to mention that I'd mentioned earlier was diversity and representation is really hard because it takes a lot of time. You have to attend events and actually go to different places and meet people and say, look, I really want you to speak at this event. You might not know about it and you might not have spoken before, but I really want you to speak. And diversity across, all things, across ethnicity and gender and race and everything. First-time speakers, seasoned speakers. That's very difficult. It takes a lot of time.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, the next one comes from our very own Gary Jones of Gamma Joe. And I can see the exclamation under the why. Why did you want to lead? Well,
like I said earlier, I'm from London. I grew up in London, so that was the thing for me. I joined this agency, and it was like, oh, there's these things called WordCamp London, and it was funny because all these kinds of terms like, oh, they have swag, and I was like, swag is something that from like hip hop videos where it's like the clothes that you wear. What do you mean you've got swag? It was all kind of really endearing to me, I guess. And I wanted to get involved. I enjoy organising events, but I think, honestly, it was something that kind of just happened. It wasn't like a solid plan that I had. It kind of just evolved into that role. After 2 years of co-organising, Jenny had to step down because you only get 2 years to organise. So it was like, okay, do we want to have a WordCamp London 2018? Who's going to do it? And, I'd amassed all that knowledge and kind of experience. So I wanted to do it. But I'm not going to do it again.
You loved it that much.
I did.
Okay, so again, the next one comes from Gary, and we'll skip over the Basingstoke WordCamp. But you mentioned during the closing remarks that there was a code of conduct violation. Gary asks if you could explain why you felt it was important to share that with everybody.
So, code of conduct, again, kind of it says what it does on the tin or whatever that term is. You can probably understand what that is, but if you haven't been to a WordCamp, all WordCamps have a code of conduct that everybody must abide by. Now, I've been to events before that kind of have codes of conduct, and I've spoken to people who have experienced things at events that kind of have codes of conduct, and I just felt that kind of sharing that with the community would do kind of two things. It would show that if something happens to you and if you feel unsafe or uncomfortable at an event, we will do something about that. Like, it was my responsibility to do something about that, and I felt that I wanted to share that with the community. Again, we were talking about, you know, this is open source. What does that mean? It means open communication, and that's probably one of the hardest things, right? You know, for all of us, we understand it, we're in the open source community, but when we're talking to enterprise clients, they're like, you share your what with who? You know, it's like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, well, this is how we make all of us better. This is how we make everything that we do better. So that was the kind of idea for me, to kind of say, look, this happened, it's okay, it's being sorted, but I'm telling you so that you know, if it happens to you, you should tell someone.
Excellent, great answer. Next question comes from Tammy Lister, works for Automatic, and she asked, what advice do you wish you'd been given before you started?
So that's funny, because like I said, I felt in an extraordinary privileged position. I had been working with Jenny, who had led the 2 years before. The lead the 2 years prior to that is also a colleague of mine. So here I am working with two of the leads. In fact, she founded the event. She found the venue, you know, she was the one who kind of really pressed the accessibility kind of, Jenny gave that a push start. So to me, I just was looking at this kind of template and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I can just kind of pick this up, and, you know, what I wanted to do was kind of replicate that. But yeah, I don't want to drag on the question. I know you've got another question.
That's good, thank you. And she also asked, if you could write a note to the next lead, what would you put in it?
Pick your core team. Like, when you have the proper people around you, things are just made so much easier, and that's what I felt I did have. I felt like I had people that I could rely on, people who understood WordPress so much better than I did, understood WordCamps, had been to thousands more WordCamps than I'd ever attended, and, you know, those are the people that just, you know, make the event. Sure, you know, you're the lead. What does that mean? There's no way. All that means, like I said, is the responsibility is with you. But I had team leads, and I delegated, you know, I gave them the kind of autonomy to make decisions for themselves. So that's definitely one thing I'd say. Like, don't want to make all the decisions by yourself. Don't be afraid to make the decisions, but don't want to do them all by yourself, because that's what's going to burn you out. Because you have to decide everything. Oh, am I going to have peas, or am I going to have mashed potato? And what am I going to have? Like, am I going to have a thing here, or am I going to have the thing there? Everything has to be decided. So, you know, assign people, delegate, make decisions is my note.
Excellent, yes. And then we've got another question from, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Lucas Like, the Like Agency. He's asked, how did you choose the right topics to talk about, and was it always community driven?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we, again, one of the things that we did inherit, which we kind of altered quite a bit actually, is this kind of speaker selection process. So part of the, and you know, this relates back to what I was talking about in terms of diversity and representation. The speaker selection process is in place so that you are being, you know, as inclusive and as fair as possible. Now, how do you do that really? Do you kind of get all these speakers in, you anonymize the sheet, and then you're just picking from the basis of the talk? Like, that's not inclusivity. That's not how you do that. So, you know, it's about doing it in processes. So the first thing that you do is you actually assign a team to help you pick those talks. I definitely didn't pick those talks myself. We went through a really long, laborious process to pick them. And secondly, I think one thing that we do, which is really good, which I would definitely recommend to other WordCamp organisers, is do a call for topics. So we do a call for topics kind of 6 weeks before we open the call for speakers, and people would submit things that they'd like to hear about, and then we make that open and accessible to everyone. So if you are thinking of applying, then you know what people have already requested. So it's definitely really community driven, but I would say it's also driven by the organisers. It kind of has to be, because that's how you get diversity and representation. You can't just blindly pick things. It doesn't happen like that.
That's great, thank you. And if Daniel James is out there watching us on the live stream, he's a hard taskmaster when it came to selecting talks.
So we had an organiser on the team, so we were voting from 1 till 5, and every talk was a 0 for him. And we were kind of like, Daniel, what is, he's like, well, no, I just don't think it's that good. And it would be like 30 talks down, and he'd be like, that's a 1. We'd be like, 1? Really?
But it was actually through that we were able to understand the community, because obviously he's coming from his perspective as a hardcore developer, and it really is about allowing the community to decide what the community wants to.
That's a good point, if you'll allow me to make it just for a few minutes, is that was another thing that we did. So like I said, I come from a communications and marketing background. I would fall through the floor if you made me sit in a development talk, because it's just not that interesting to me. Some of them are, but they're just not, and that's okay. So we made sure to have a kind of cross spectrum of skills and disciplines. So we had the developers, we've got the community people, we've got the communications and marketing people, the sales people, the design, and hopefully we were able to cover kind of a good cross spectrum.
That's great, thank you. We do have just a couple of minutes to open up to yourselves, to the floor. Does anybody out there have any questions for Anna at all? Yes.
I just wanted to ask, what was the best thing about being the WordCamp lead organiser? Just because I know that there's always good and bad, but
I would probably say that there's mainly good things. I'll tell you what the bad things were. So I think the good things were just the people that you're working with. Like, I know that maybe sounds a bit cliche, but like I said, I had felt very much like a WordPress novice. I just did not know people in the WordPress community. I knew people from Human Made and kind of some people I met at WordCamp events, but beyond that, I just did not have that kind of extended network. And now I do. Now I feel like I know everybody in the WordPress London community. I think the one bad thing I would definitely say is that there's too much of a kind of thing about the lead, you know. And don't get me wrong, of course I worked really hard and it was a huge effort on my part, but like I was saying earlier, it is the effort of a community. I wouldn't be able to lead this event if people hadn't been putting in the work prior to that. So I do think that there's this kind of thing about being the lead, which I didn't love, because I really wanted to, everybody wants to get recognition for the work that they did, absolutely, and I'm no different. But I also think that there's kind of too much of a kind of light being shone in the direction of the lead, when in fact the volunteers on the day, they run the event. They're the ones who actually run the event. They're the ones who are answering questions and getting people to the right place. So,
excellent, thank you. Do you have any more questions for Anna at all? Paul?
You haven't heard me talking enough, have you?
No, not yet. If there was one thing that you would change, what would it be?
I guess, did he take a question? Oh, no way. No, I absolutely, definitely wouldn't change any of my organisers. You know, at the risk of repeating myself, but I will repeat myself because I'll also want to be consistent, is I would have put more time into diversity and representation. I spoke to Jenny about this when we kind of started, and you know, I have a very good open relationship with Jenny. I kind of said to Jenny, look Jenny, I grew up in a borough which is 63% non-white. Why am I only seeing so many white people in WordPress? Like this is, it does not feel representative to me. And she was like, Anna, this is what you need to do. You need to go to all of these events. And it was 7 events a week. I just did not have the time. I wish I'd had the time. So if I could go back, and for every 10 hours that I spent doing all these other tasks, if I'd spent the same amount of time going to events and meeting new people and kind of trying to find out, you know, oh, who's not a speaker that should be a speaker? So that's what I would do.
Excellent. Well, Anna, thank you very much for your time, and thank you
you
for all your work regarding that went into WordCamp London. There's been some incredible feedback from the community, and I just personally want to say a big thank you, but I know also the community as well are very grateful to yourself and the team that were around the event. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Okay, so we've just got a quick break now. Just before we do, though, I just also want to mention, as Anna's mentioned a couple of times there, that Anna is stepping down as the lead for WordCamp London 2019. So if there's anybody interested out there that wants to get involved in WordCamp 2019 and creating it and making it happen, then make yourself known. Make yourself known to who, really?
Not to me. Joking. No, in all seriousness, if you are interested, I would be very happy to talk to you at any point. Yeah, so.
So, thank you. And yeah.